Okay, so as someone who indeed knows how to code, I've been meaning to address the whole learn to code nonsense for some time now. After Joe Biden's ridiculous comments that coal miners can learn to program, I figured this was as good a time as any.
Anybody who could go down 300 to 3,000 feet in the mine, sure and hell can learn how to program as well. Give me a break. Anybody who can throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program, for God's sake.
Now, I have a charitable interpretation of Biden's comments. I think crazy Uncle Joe meant this as a compliment. He's saying that coal miners are no less intelligent than programmers, and I think he's right. They are two professions that simply make use of different cognitive regions. Here is the problem with Biden's comment: the use of the word can is misleading. Why? Because a laid-off coal miner could almost certainly learn to program in a language like Python given the time and resources, but it's the time and resources that are the problem, not whether said coal miner has the cognitive capacity to do so. Let's back up a bit so I can describe my experience in learning to code. I learned to code in my early 20s. At that age, our brains are like sponges. Furthermore, I was already highly computer literate. I was the guy people went to for help when they couldn't figure out how to change their resolution or how to see their browser toolbar. I already understood how and why the internet worked. The programming language I was learning was a server-side language that allowed visitors to a website to create and modify their accounts on a website. This was easy for me to learn because I already understood how HTML, internet browsers and databases worked. Without this foreknowledge, this programming language would have no context in my mind. I would have to go back and learn the basics before learning how to code in this language. What I was not, was a middle-aged person who'd barely touched a computer on occasion, perhaps to send emails and maybe keep in touch with family members on Facebook. I was also single, and in an area with much demand for this skill set. Working in this field would not require me to uproot my immediate family halfway across the country, away from the rest of our family into an area with much higher costs of living. And then having to compete with people half my age, willing to work for less. So my point is, it's not a matter of cognitive capacity, as Joe Biden and others who parrot the learn to code meme tend to imply. It's a matter of life choices. The person who chose to become a coal miner 20 to 30 years ago could almost certainly have become a successful programmer had they chosen that route. But 20 to 30 years ago, computers weren't so ubiquitous and it was generally assumed that in order to become a programmer, you had to be a socially awkward pencil pocket-wearing nerd with an IQ of 120 in order to program. There simply wasn't the market for programmers that we now have. And this takes us back to Andrew Yang's message, and why he and possibly Tulsi Gabbard are the only ones with a realistic grasp on this issue of automation. Jobs are being automated at an alarming rate. Retraining sounds nice, but it is not a very scalable solution. The freedom dividend will empower Americans by providing more buying power, which will generate local jobs, helping offset the overall loss of jobs. Some will be empowered to create their own businesses. It will also help stay-at-home parents who may not have a choice to work. Meeting this challenge is going to take a revamping of how we think of our economy. This is why the industry titans who are in the know, are suggesting we do so. They know better than anyone else that empty platitudes about learning to code or something pick yourself up by your bootstraps isn't going to get us anywhere. Here is Elon Musk explaining why universal basic income is necessary.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better. Okay. What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job, machine, robot is taking over.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I think that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen. And if if my assessment is correct, and they probably will happen, then we need to say, what are we going to do about it? And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary. Now, the output of goods and services will be extremely high. So with automation, there will come abundance. There will be almost everything will get very cheap. I think I think we'll just end up doing a universal basic income. It's going to be necessary. The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, how do you, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with.